Hello and welcome to Health Matters on Channels Television. Thanks for staying with us. I am Mary Alale Yusuf. All over the world, there were over 88 million confirmed cases of COVID-19, more than 49 million recoveries and over 1.9 million deaths, sadly, on January the 8th, 2021. In Nigeria, on the same day, records showed more than 97,000 cases, over 78,000 recoveries, and 1,342 deaths. Recovery rate is 80.5%, and fatality rate is about 1.4%. Total samples tested are now more than 1 million. Nigeria is facing the second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. This one is characterized by more infections than the first, with many more serious and critical cases. Until vaccines are available, and even after they are, let's look at what changes should be made to keep the situation in check. My guest on the show today is the team lead of vaccine design and development in the Nigeria Institute of Medical Research and research fellow in the Department of Biochemistry and Nutrition, Dr. James Ayorinde. You're welcome to the show.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Let me ask you the question on everybody's minds.
Okay.
First of all, is it the Pfizer vaccine we are getting? Can you tell us?
Well, we have that information, but not verified if what we are getting is the Pfizer vaccine. But we all heard over the news that we'll be having about 100 doses of the vaccine, but most likely, it may likely be the Pfizer vaccine that we'll be having.
Is that going to make a dent in the whole outbreak thing? Is it going to make any difference to us?
Well, to a certain level, it could help boost immunity, but nonetheless, vaccines are never the panacea to the problems that we are having today.
Okay, before we get into that, I cannot get past the fact that it has to be stored at minus 70 degrees centigrade. They say your ice cream will be a stone at that temperature. So, with the kind of electricity supply we have, how sustainable is this?
Well, I personally believe that some of this could be reviewed. Some of these decisions could be reviewed. However, we have quite a number of institutes around the country that they have minus 80 freezers.
Okay.
Right? And some of them are probably well powered. But nonetheless, it may not be enough to store vaccines to vaccinate millions of Nigeria. But like I said, some of these decisions could be reviewed, and we have quite a number of other vaccines that are on the market now, and we could go for some of them in the long run.
Okay, so we have like 3 major vaccines we keep talking about, the Pfizer, the Astrazeneca, and the Moderna. What are the differences, and which would you rather, I mean, if we had a choice?
The Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines are nucleic acid-based vaccines. And what I mean by that is that we all know about DNA, right? And DNA is like a code that determines who we are, what we're going to look like. And from DNA, we have a secondary level of information, which we call the mRNA. Okay. Like you're computing, you have primary level, secondary level.
What does the M mean there?
Messenger RNA.
Okay, messenger ribonucleic acid. Okay.
So the DNA only stores information, but the RNA, you can interpret the information on the RNA to make the spike protein of the virus. So the design for the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine is the making of the mRNA. So what you have in those vaccines are mRNA scripts. Okay. So once the mRNA is being injected into the host, which is us, humans, the human system will now translate the information on the mRNA into the spike protein of the virus in the human. Okay. Whereas for the other vaccines, you are injecting either the whole of the vaccine itself. Let's take, for example, we get the COVID virus, we kill it, or we make it less severe, and we inject weak, which some people call attenuated, and we have it injected into the host, you're putting the whole of the virus into the system.
Okay,
right?
I get that.
But in this case, you're not putting the whole of the virus into the system. You're putting the RNA, that thing that translates the genetic information of the spike protein only of the virus. And we know that it's the spike protein that is being recognized by our immune system.
Yes.
And that is what elicits or engages, immune response, that we say we have immunity against the virus. So much so that even when we get infected with the virus, I jokingly say that you have been immunized, because your system...
your response system
Yes.
wakes up and starts to form antibodies.
But the case of the Astrazeneca is a host pathogen, but not the COVID-19 pathogen. It was, yes.
Okay.
So it was developed from another type of virus called the adenovirus. And this has been used over the years to develop a number of viruses that are being used. In fact, some people use it in the lab to transfer genes, even from one point to the other. So what they did was get the adenovirus, which is known to commonly cause common cold, and get part of the COVID-19 S protein, because we are looking for the guy that, the best way you can recognize me is by my, once you see my face.
That's right.
Alone, you would say, oh, that's James, right? Rather than put the whole of James, you just get what codes for James' head that you can recognize into the adenovirus.
So that's what AstraZeneca is doing. It's like a combination of two things they're putting together.
Yes, genetically. And that's why they write recombinant on their package, because genetically you have two different genetic makeups. Okay. Adenovirus.
So at the end of the day, what is the difference? What's the difference to the human? To the human, very good. Permit me to use you as the adenovirus. Okay. I'm COVID, right? My head is the S protein. So you are less severe. You cause common cold. So what they do in the lab is to take my head and put on you. Okay. So the S protein is on the adenovirus. So when you get into here, you elicit immune response against the S protein. Okay. But you don't have the machinery that causes the severity in the COVID virus. Aha. And that's the trick. Right. Okay. So it's almost like a sure banker that you're not going to fall sick. And that you will elicit an immune response.
Yes. But the data that we've received shows that the Pfizer vaccines are more effective. Okay. But nonetheless, there is hardly no vaccine that would not elicit some form of adverse side effects that we would usually see.
Speaking of which, first of all, differentiate for me an adverse reaction and an allergic reaction. Are they the same?
Well, no, to a certain extent. But allergic reactions are at times when you develop, to some certain extent, they have some form of biology, to some certain extent. But allergic reactions, in a simple term, is when you react to some things that, like maybe, let's say, some form of fur, some can't sit on non-leather chairs and things like that. But adverse reactions are usually reactions you get when you put in a foreign body into the system, and the system
eruptions
and the system is trying to develop, is developing more immune response, in like a storm. Which some people call, some say cytokine storm, and you have some special types of antibodies that are being developed.
Okay, so how is this vaccine going to be administered? Are they going to sit a person down, give it to him, and watch him for 30 minutes or 1 hour to make sure he's going to be okay when he goes home?
That's usually part of the protocol.
Is that the protocol for all vaccines, or is this peculiar to the COVID vaccine?
Well, many times when people take vaccines,
because nobody sat and watched my baby when he took
at times
DPT.
you wait a bit, but the issue is this: it's not a matter of you waiting because you don't know who's going to develop adverse reactions. And what matters is how do you handle some of these issues? Then how much of this do we have in some of these vaccines?
Do they have, what do they call them? The thing that you use to stop an adverse reaction?
Yes, of course. The people in the clinic.
Epinephrine or whatever, or something like that.
Every vaccine usually would have its own way of handling some of these adverse reactions.
Okay.
And that's the essence of the phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 clinical trials. So that some of these things would have been observed, and if they need to make amendments to some of their designs. And permit me to say that one of the key things in vaccine design is safety. Okay. And that's usually the primary concern of anybody designing a vaccine. It's not enough for us to just come up with something and inject it into the host. But many times when you're designing, you want to be sure that what you're designing would elicit sufficient immune response and sustained immune response. Because you could have, there are some classes of vaccines they call subunit vaccines. And rather, like I said, that the one of my head as the S protein. So rather than put my head on another pathogen, right, I just take off my head only and inject the S protein.
Okay.
And that would also elicit immune response. So
these are all different methods.
They are all different methods. But the question is it how sustainable, how immunodominant is what you're eliciting? So,
okay, let me just quickly put this in here. We are hearing that anybody who gets the vaccines in Nigeria should be ready to use them within 5 days, or else it could be non-viable anymore. But let's take a quick break. You will answer that after the break. We're taking a very short break. Stay with us for the rest of the show. Welcome back. We're talking vaccines on Health Matters on Channels Television. Call 0805-468-3514 if you have questions on vaccines or variants, and tweet at CTV_Mary A for the same purpose. We were talking about the 5-day safety period, so to speak, of the vaccine, so that after 5 days, it might not be viable. How sustainable is that? Have we ever done that for any other vaccine in Nigeria?
Well, the Pfizer vaccines technology are about the latest technologies in vaccine design or development. And they've never been used for vaccination. Okay. So this is about the first time they are going to be used. But we know that RNA are usually not stable if they are not properly stored.
Okay, that RNA thing.
Yes, because it's an RNA vaccine. So we need a lot of cold chain logistics. The question of sustainability is based on those who are handling the economics of it.
Yes.
Is it sustainable?
It's going to cost a lot of money.
So they have to look at that.
Okay.
But we don't know the plans in which they have or they have in place to achieving that. But the question is, how sustainable is it? But all we know is that anything that is nucleic acid must be stored at cold chain. For RNA, you need -70, -80 for long-term storage. For 5 days, it could still be potent if it's properly stored, but not higher than -20.
Okay.
But the moment...
Or lower than higher than -20, yes. It shouldn't be warmer than -20.
So which means it can't stay in your normal fridge.
Yes.
So you need a freezer to move it about.
That's a tough one. Okay, there's this other thing. It's said that medications generally that are used on Caucasians don't have the same effect on black people. How true is this? Is it true for vaccines? Well,
I don't think there's any, I'm yet to see any data to support that, because we are all humans and immune response is usually elicited the same way. Immunology is, except in very few exceptional cases where you have some other factors, like at times, some of us have probably been exposed to some of these other variants of this pathogen. it might interest you to note that sequence data of Middle Eastern respiratory virus, syndrome virus, had been done from samples that were collected in northern parts of Nigeria.
We had MERS?
Yes, samples that were collected, right, and were sequenced. So we have sequenced data.
Okay, so we've been exposed to stuff we don't even know about.
So many times in this part of the world...
Just a minute, let me just pause you there. Sorry about that. Austin is calling and I don't want him to drop. Hello, Austin.
Hello, yes.
You're welcome to the show.
Yeah. Please, hello?
We can hear you.
This is Austin from Asaba. Hello, ma.
What's your question, Austin? We can hear you.
The vaccine. You know, people have complained about the vaccine that is very bad. They cannot. Yes. So people are talking about vaccine that is very bad. They cannot take it. They say it's so harmful. So I'm trying to ask, what is the content? Is it good for the men, or is it good for people to take it without harming us?
Okay. Thank you, Austin. We will handle that. I'm sure you've heard people like Austin, you know, over the weeks saying, heard people like whom Austin has heard saying the vaccine is not good. It's no good. It's not good for us. We can't take it. Tell us about this vaccine.
Well, Mr. Austin, before any vaccine is released to the population, they're usually properly tested. They do a lot of laboratory investigations, and they do 3 phases of clinical trials to first check how safe they are. And they also do safety and efficacy, and they also, they keep checking. But nonetheless, anything that is being developed would always have its own side effects. But what we try to do, or what the people developing the vaccines try to do, is to minimize some of the adverse effects that we see or that are usually being reported. So we can't outrightly say that the vaccine is not good. The vaccines are good, but what we need to look at is what are the pros and cons of different, because the vaccines have different biology, they have different ways in which they were designed, and each design has its pros and cons. But nonetheless, we need vaccines. The vaccines that have been released are good, but they may have their side effects, and I'm sure the manufacturers of these vaccines have detailed their caveats that this and this have been reported. And these vaccines were just given emergency approval, because it takes many years to develop vaccines, right? But nonetheless, what we are saying is that vaccine is not the final solution, but the vaccines are good, sir.
Okay, every vaccine I hear is going to be completed in 2 doses.
Yeah.
What if somebody has an allergic reaction to the first dose? Is it okay to let him off on 1?
It might be difficult for me to give you an answer on that, because the manufacturers of the vaccine usually have their protocols, and you have those who run some of these clinical trials, to tell you what the protocols are. So I'm not familiar with some of these protocols on what happens when you experience some of this. But usually, the person would hardly come back. That's what happens.
Yes, if he has an adverse reaction or an allergy, he wouldn't come back. Now, the vaccines that people are taking, how long will they be effective? Some vaccines, they say it's going to last for 10 years. Some, they say for life. How long is this one expected to have an effect on the person?
Well, that's the essence of the dual dose. But we don't know for sure. And that's why in our institute, we are even trying to see, for those who have even been exposed, the antibodies they elicit, can it neutralize the virus after 8 months? Because being exposed to the virus is almost similar to getting vaccinated, right? Because they both elicit immune response. So what is being elicited? The antibodies being produced, whether you've been exposed or not. But usually we want to look at those who have been exposed to the virus. That can they neutralize the virus in the lab?
Okay, so it's all in watching,
Yes.
observing, especially because it's a new
because
virus.
it's a new virus. But nobody can tell you certainly that it's going to last for 10 years.
Let's close on that point. And this has been really good. I'm going to have you back because there's still a lot to discuss. But thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Austin, for the call, and everybody at home for listening. Have a wonderful day. I am Mary Alale Yusuf.